So does everybody see this screen now? Your server's running. You see the standard create React app screen. Everybody good? Sweet. So if we need to add routing to our app, we should probably add a router to it. Makes sense, right? There he is. Hi. Good thing you didn't miss anything yet. All right, so. Whoa, that's interesting. What? That's interesting. All right, there we go. Man, I really hope that shows up on the video. All right. So, first things first, if you have yarn, just yarn add React router DOM. And if you have npm, then it is going to be npm install -- save dev, or not dev, just save, React router DOM. I think everybody in the morning class had yarn now, so you guys need to step it up. Be one of the cool kids. So now if you look in your package.json, we've got our normal React and React DOM, and then we've also added React router DOM now. Hooray. All right, so now we've got React router in our project. Does anybody remember what the other part we had to do is? Or like to venture a guess? We just installed it through the yarn add or the npm install. We just need to wrap our app in the router, right? So like right now, we're just rendering the app as our root component, but we want the router to be our root component and the app to be inside of it. So that way everything is controlled by the router. So in our main index.js, so where our app is actually getting attached, we need to import the router. You say import. And specifically, since we're in a browser, we want the browser router. But we can just say as router, so we can call it router. From React router DOM. So the actual thing we're importing is browser router. And then we're just saying as router. So then that way we can just call it router, and we don't have to write browser router every time because that gets really annoying to say and write. So once we have it imported, let's go ahead and break this onto multiple lines so it's a bit easier. We just need to wrap our app in the router. Tab that over so it's more obvious. So we're still calling React DOM render, with 2 arguments. The first argument is this, which is our app wrapped in a router. And the second argument is where in index.html we are attaching that router. So if we did that right, everything should look exactly the same, but also not blowed up. Oh, good. No errors. Does everybody still see this? Successful. Excellent. So we'll do a quick commit there. Add React router. And wrap app component in router. So now if you look on here and you're using your React console, you can see now our root level is the browser router. And you get all this cool stuff like history. And here's all those methods we talked about. The go method, go back, go forward. We have a match property in state, which tells you the path in the URL we're on, whether it's exact or not. And param, since we don't have any params in our URL, is currently just an empty object. All right, so we want this to not look like this. We want it to look like this, right? So any thoughts on what the first thing we should do is? What's the simplest thing? Change the header? Yeah, good call. Let's do that. Go into your app.js. Let's get rid of this app intro. We don't need that. Let's get rid of the logo and the welcome to React. We also don't need to import the logo anymore. And let's add in here. Just give it a new class, app headings. Inside that div, we're going to say, ain't no party like an API party. Easy enough. And now it said that, which looks totally sweet and well styled. Maybe we should add some styles. Oh, that reminds me. Let's see here. There's quite a few styling rules, so I'm not going to make us write them all out. I'll just paste them in Slack here in just a second. All right. There you go. So you can just copy those into your app.css and actually just overwrite everything that's currently in here. You don't need any of that. And that should then look much better. Everybody got it looking like this? Cool. Let's do a quick commit there. Add header and style. So what's up next? We got our header. What's next on here? So this is the final one. This is what ours currently looks like. What's the next thing we're missing? What was that? These things? Is that what you're talking about? So the links, right? So if we're going to navigate to links, we kind of need the links to be there. We can do that. So below this div, which is our headings div, it's going to be right below that. Let's put in a UL. Why does it not want to do my autocomplete today? And Remember, we need, how do we navigate using router? Does anybody remember what the two components were called? Link and the nav link, right? Which one do you want to use, link or nav link? I think I heard it from over here. Nav link. And why nav link? Yeah. So you know which page is active. All right, so let's do that. So we need to import that from import navlink from React Router DOM. And then where should navlink link to? What's our first one go to? This one? Slash GitHub, right? And then the text just says GitHub API. Let's see how that looks. Probably real great. Yes, lovely. There's our link. Click on it. It does go to slash GitHub. Doesn't do anything else yet, but that's fine. But we know it's working. And then our other two links are NASA and homework. So you can just copy this one. Paste it twice. Change that to slash NASA. And slash homework. All right. There we go. It looks great. Ship it. Probably use some more styles on that. I'm gonna drop these in Slack real quick for you. There you go. Oh, that didn't work. Does anybody know why? Let's look at our rules. What do these rules all apply to? Yeah. Yeah, we didn't put in our class name, did we? So on the UL, put in a class name of navlinks. There we go. That's much better. Now you notice in these rules, so it's not just about like padding and list style and all that, but you'll see we have, for the links, we color them blue. When they have the active class, we're coloring them orange, and then we also have hover options for that as well. So we're not adding, we didn't do anything in here to add an active class to them. That's just kind of what navlinks does for you. So it automatically puts that active class, but we can style it by adding that as part of our style sheet. So if we want it to look different when it's active, it does give us that active class. So then we can do stuff like that. That's probably worth a commit. Add navlinks and style. I'm not. I mean, I will eventually, but... Do you need me to push them? Yeah. I'm going to push it on afternoon branch. Why does it think something changed? Oh, that's the wrong one. That's why. Not that one. That's the one I was looking for. I'm going to close these other two tabs so I don't confuse myself. Okay, should be up there now. All right, so currently we got this. We can click on stuff. That does change our URL, but we're not rendering anything yet. So what are we rendering when I'm just at the root, which is just slash? So like I don't have any additional. So really just what's the difference between what we currently have and what the finalized app looks like. Not a trick question. Yep, so we're just missing this part. So this is basically what's going to render when we're at our root route. So if the route doesn't match one of these things, we want to render this, right? Let's go ahead and do that. So we can use, we didn't specifically talk about this in the presentation about React Router, but has everybody used a switch or like case statement before? Yeah, so basically it just gives you a bunch of options and it either matches one of them or it goes to like a default case. So Router has the same kind of thing. So go ahead and import switch and route from React Router DOM as well. And so outside of our header, but still inside the app, so right below this last closing div tag, we're going to add a switch component. And then our first route is just going to be the default one, so it doesn't even need a match path because we really want it to render whenever it doesn't match one of the other ones. And we're just going to say render, pass it an anonymous function, and say to get started, click one of the links above. And then make sure you don't forget your route closing tag over here. So basically, we've got our switch defined. There's no other routes defined yet, so this should match when we don't do anything else. And we're just telling it, hey, when that happens, just render this p tag with this text in it. So theoretically, we should now see that. Excellent. There we go. So now what do we want to have happen when we go to one of these other ones? Not render that. Yeah, so we needed to match some other route, right? So let's start with the GitHub one. So we can just put another route in our switch statement. And What path are we looking for? /GitHub, right? 'Cause that's where our link is going. And for now, let's just do a render again. So what should happen when I click on the GitHub link now? The URL changes to /GitHub. It looks in my switch set here. It says, do I have any routes that match that path? Yes, it does. And then it's going to render. GitHub is awesome. Let's see if that works. Yeah, it does. That's interesting. There we go. Got to refresh to get that to work. So now, if I don't have any /whatever, I get this. As soon as I click that, now it goes to /GitHub, and now we're rendering something different. Make sense? Easy enough. So we probably don't want it to just do that, right? Our final product looks a bit more complicated than that. We need to render this stuff. So it'd probably be good to make a whole actual component for it. So let's do that. Well, first I'm going to do a commit. Add route for GitHub. Then we're going to add a new file. GitHub.js, making a new component. And you guys have done this a bunch of times, made a new component, right? What's my first thing I need to do? Import React. And then set up my class. And last but not least, what? Export it, right? Every component needs a render method. All right, so we got this component made. Let's import it over here in our app so we can use it. And then if instead of a render, I want it to use a component, how do I do that? Pretty easy. I just tell it what component I want it to render. So let's get rid of this render statement and just say component equals GitHub. Check and make sure. Yeah, it really is sweet. So going to one of my other ones, we still don't have routes for these, so it's still rendering that default route, right? Because it's going to catch anything that it doesn't actually match. So these two that we haven't made components or routes for are still going to show that. But GitHub now matches this path, and it knows, hey, if I match /GitHub, I have a route for that. What component do I render? I render the GitHub component. I'll do a quick commit there. Do you need me to push that up? I'm going to do a -U so I can do it from the... There we go. Okay. So our next step, we've got this. So we know that we can click on a link, we have a route for it, and it renders a component. But this probably isn't what we want the component to ultimately look like, right? We want it to show the GitHub logo, because that's sweet. We want some sort of input field so we can input a username. And then a button so it knows, hey, I'm done inputting the username, and let's look that up, right? So let's do that. So in GitHub, let's get rid of this. We don't want it to render that anymore. Man, why does it want to do that? Remember, our React components all have to return a single element, so we'll wrap everything in a div with the class name of GitHub. We need the logo, right? And then you can go out on the internet if you want and find your own GitHub logo, or I'll just paste it in here. So you can add that as the source. And don't forget your alt. Because putting in an alt is nice. And you're not jerks, are you? Most of you? Yeah, you look friendly. Like you want to help people out. We got our image. It's real big. That's nice. And then we need our form. And in that form is an input. Wrap it in a div. I don't know what's messed up on my autocomplete stuff. Don't type that. And then we also need a button, right? Maybe my button will work. Oh, the button works. Excellent. And it is a submit button. That says look up GitHub user. All right, so let's have a look at what that looks like. Looks pretty good. I think that'll do nicely. Maybe we add some CSS to it. Probably. Good idea. Let's make a GitHub CSS file. There's some rules for you. Once you get those made, don't forget to import it into your component. There we go. That's a bit better. All right, so what's our form currently do? I see, yeah. I see some shaking heads. It doesn't do anything, right? We haven't tied the value to anything. It doesn't have any idea what to do when we submit. So let's start with the first thing. How do we tie this value to something useful? We've done this a few times now. What do I need to do in this component? If we want to tie the value in an input field to our component. Thoughts? Really? Nobody knows? Props? Are props mutable? Can we change props from within a component? No. So what's the one we can change? State. Yeah, we need some state. We can do that. So probably make some username. And what should the username be when we first load the component? Nothing, right? Blank string. Yep. So initializes a blank string. And then how do I tie state.username to the input? Remember, we can just put in the value. So just quick recap. We got our main app component. It's got the 3 links on it. One is the GitHub API. When I click on this nav link, it changes the URL to /GitHub. That's going to match this route and know to render the GitHub component. When the GitHub component gets loaded up, state, when it first loads up, the username is just a blank string, and that is tied to our input value. So I should see nothing here right now, right? Good. But I can't type anything in. Anybody remember why? Why can't I change it? Yeah. Yeah, it's a one-way binding. So we bound it to state, but we didn't give any way for our input to change state, right? So we need an on-change handler. So let's do that. I'm going to break this onto consecutive lines since my font size is big. So we don't have to go way out to the side. So we'll attach an on-change event handler and call a method that we'll call handleChange, which we'll need to define. What sort of parameter will handleChange get? Keep in mind that it is an event handler. An event, yeah. Since it is an event, That means the value of that text box is just going to be current target.value, right? So if I can get the value of the input, how do I change state then to reflect that? Set state. And of course, we can pass an anonymous function so we can log it. So we can make sure that's working correctly. So let's see. Can I change it now? That would be super great if I could. Yeah. Excellent. So I don't really need that console log in there. Just do that to make sure it's working right. And styles and on change handler. All right, any questions so far? I know that was something we've done several times, just be able to handle input from a form. Yep. All right, so we got a form that works, changes state. Let's do a quick comparison here. So on this one, we've got this. This is the only thing we're currently missing, right? So, and the way this one works, this is showing when our URL is exactly /GitHub, and it goes away when, I'm going to use yours again. It changes, right? So when it changes, that first one goes away. We get the data from the GitHub API and we render that instead. So it's kind of like our default route on the first one, right? So yeah, we can do something similar here. We're going to do it slightly different just to get used to a different way to do it as well. So let's go ahead and import our route here, because we're going to need that. Can we think of why we don't necessarily want to use a switch here? And we could use a switch. We could do it exactly the same way we did on app, right? Really the difference here is that there's really only two conditions. Either it's an exact match or it's not. On the main one, we've got multiple links, right? So we could have multiple different things that we want to switch between. So you could use a switch, but it's kind of weird to use a switch for just two different conditions. So really, it's either have an exact match or we don't. And remember from the presentation, we have a way to say, I want to render this if it's an exact match. So let's use that one here. So below your form, let's add another route. And again, we want it to be an exact match, so we just put the word exact in there, and it knows what to do from there. So when it's exactly /GitHub, we want it to render, not that. Get rid of that. Just please enter a username to search on GitHub, right? So we can do that. Again, I'm going to break it onto a second line just to save some room. So let's do an H3. Big, but not too big. It says, please enter a username to search on GitHub. And of course, don't forget your closing tag, self-closing tag on the route at the end there. So now, as long as our path is exactly /GitHub, that should render. And it looks like it does. And you notice if I put anything else here, so it's not an exact match anymore, that doesn't show up anymore.